the man who really has a real great sense of Tennessee history, of really Tennessee Volunteers history. We're not going to talk to him about Alvin C. York or Sequoia here in a second, but the man who has a really good journalistic principles in his writing, I think, and a guy who really called it on the offensive coordinator search with Kendall Briles is, of course, Caleb Calhoun of allfortennessee.com. He's become my favorite Tennessee writer to speak to. He also is a Maryland grad and really knows the Terps. Who better to have on for the second time in a week than Caleb Calhoun, allfortennessee.com. And before we get to Maryland, and that search does impact Tennessee's offensive coordinator search, what with the Dan Enos factor involved in all this, I do want to ask, Kendall Briles, he seems to be, he was a guy you always liked to become the Vols' next offensive coordinator. It now seems that he is on a short list of 3, along with Neil Brown, the head coach at Troy, and Yursich at Oklahoma State, of becoming perhaps the offensive coordinator. That's the target right there. What are your thoughts? Why did it take him so long to listen to Caleb Calhoun?
I still don't know. I can't for the life of me figure out why they didn't do it. Maybe, my guess is I've kind of come to the realization that, no matter what I'm reading on throughout any different Tennessee media companies, and this is all due respect to the few reporters there that I know a lot of them do their best, this is the second coaching search in a row where a ton of stuff leaks from credible media sources that doesn't really necessarily appear to have really all been true.
Yeah.
And so my guess for putting this all around is that I don't think they had this hot board of a bunch of guys and Kendall Briles wasn't on the list. I think they were just really, really set on hiring Hugh Freeze. And it looks like that's not going to go through. So now they've gone back to the drawing board with a few other coaches in mind. So I'm starting to think maybe it wasn't that they had all these guys and weren't thinking about Kendall Briles. Maybe they were just so set on Hugh Freeze and nobody else that that we didn't really hear any leaks about Kendall Briles. Because we heard for a while that Will Friend was in contention, but then we hear that they're not going to promote from within. So I've kind of come around to I need like 3 or 4 different sources now in East Tennessee or Tennessee-related media before I can confirm any rumor is true.
Well, I agree with you, Caleb Calhoun. It became intriguing, the conflicting reports from Bruce Feldman and Chris Lowe. Is Freeze a candidate? Is he not a candidate? That became an interesting dynamic, but I wonder if that is bad reporting or if it is the sources, the leaked sources giving conflicting information from Tennessee, or even you mentioned Hugh Freeze, that Tennessee, kind of still thinks of itself possibly as being this grand elite SEC program when they have had so many hardships over the last 10 years, and the brand has probably fallen, where that, they can release these names so that, these guys will be interested in us, when maybe they're not. These are some things that I wonder about with Tennessee these days when they're looking for an offensive coordinator. I mean, the idea of getting, the offensive coordinator from the NFL or something, this isn't Ray Perkins that they're trying to get. There's a dated reference, I know, but he's the guy that left the New York Giants to coach Alabama when Bear Bryant retired, if you're not familiar or so. But, how often do you go from the pros to college, especially on a lateral move? I sometimes wonder what's going on here. What are they really thinking there at Tennessee, I guess. But I want to ask you this. Kendall Briles. This is a guy who comes in with some baggage. If Hugh Freeze, and we spoke of him, was going to put the scope of the NCAA on Tennessee, and that's why he's not hired. Well, certainly Kendall Briles, the same would happen when you consider what happened at Baylor during his tenure there. Do you think that Briles is quote unquote clean enough to get the job at Tennessee?
I do, only because there were rumors of things Briles had said, but unlike Freeze, he's never ever been convicted or I guess I don't mean convicted in criminal court. I mean, he's never been confirmed to be guilty of anything or any type of violation. And unlike Schiano, there's no sworn deposition accusing him of anything.
Well, now, wait a minute. I read online here there was a suit filed where it had alleged, and I wrote about this on my monologue and Medium and all this, and I want to say this, it was reported, Matthew DeFrank, South Florida Sun-Sentinel, okay, according to a lawsuit that was filed about 23 months ago, where, let's see, alleging gang rape by Baylor football players, and again, this is, you can say this is hearsay. Yes, yes. Do you like white women? Because we have a ton of them at Baylor. They love football players. According to the lawsuit, the Baylor coaching staff used a show-them-a-good-time approach in recruiting, which allegedly included taking recruits to strip clubs, making girls in Baylor's hostess program available for sex, and using drugs and alcohol. I have no idea why using drugs and alcohol would be something you'd want to recruit with. It would seem to me that you'd want players who wanted to stay away from that, and such. The lawsuit, the accuser, called Elizabeth Doe, is said to be aware of 52 acts of rape, including 5 gang rapes by at least 31 different Baylor players during a 3-year period of 2011 to 2014. I'm beginning to see now why, if they did take recruits to strip clubs, and they did ask the hostess honeys to, for lack of a better term, put out why Kiffin wanted Briles to be his assistant at FAU, considering the whole Lacey Pearl Earps thing. I mean, and all this. But no, that was said in a lawsuit. Again, I mean, it's an allegation, and we certainly heard a lot about his Dre Bowles telling the truth, at one time as well. Was Mike McQuarrie with Greg Schiano. I mean, we heard about that, but that is out there. So it is not a paper trail like you have with Freeze and the prostitutes, or at least the phone calls to escort services, but it's out there. I gotta say that.
I agree it's out there. I wasn't denying that. I don't think it doesn't, with Kendall Brown specifically, it didn't seem as incriminating as it did, well, definitely not a paper trail with Freeze, and it also didn't seem as incriminating as it may have with Schiano, only because, again, this was a sworn deposition where this was said against Schiano, and I don't know if he's ever really come out and denied it wholeheartedly. So that's where I was going with it. But yeah, I wasn't denying that Kendall Brown does have a little bit of baggage with him, but we also know that it's nowhere near as bad as the Hugh Freeze baggage, and so I think, and he's bounced around for coordinator jobs since then, and honestly, unlike Schiano at Ohio State, if we're doing the comparison there, he actually looks pretty good as a coordinator.
Yeah, and I see that. Yeah, Briles, I mean, took FAU 10 victories, and they fell on their face when he went back to Houston. And obviously, Houston likes him because they gave him a nice raise of $700,000 a year. Although you think that the Vols could top that. It's just a situation. Somebody said, if they didn't hire Freeze, and the idea is the NCAA would have their scope on him, or it's a bad look after the whole Schiano uprising. How are you going to get away with hiring Kendall Briles? That's the thing. It's a legitimate question. So we'll see how this works out and such. I do want to go to Mike Locksley, and you want to talk about a guy with baggage. I mean, not only was he 3-31 at New Mexico, which has had 10 victory seasons in their past, as a matter of fact, but really the things that happened there, from Locksley threatening a student reporter, for crying out loud. Why was this guy hired at Maryland? Is it all because, hey, you come from that Alabama system, and so you got to be good, New Mexico be damned?
No, it's actually more than that. It's and I know this well, having learned this area. I remember when Randy Edsel hired Mike Locksley as first offensive coordinator, and he was, out of the blue, Maryland sort of locking up DMV recruits like never before. They hired him for 2 reasons. He's the one guy with enough connections in the area that can finally actually lock off recruits in Maryland, because we all know that they go everywhere but Maryland.
Yeah.
And so that I'm with you. I didn't like the hire. I'm like, Maryland literally just fired a coach for player abuse.
Yeah.
And they're going to hire somebody who has a history of abuse as a coach.
Yeah. That was like, did they not learn?
Yeah.
And I think that, you talk about he can shore up the people in Maryland. I mean, that remains to be seen. I mean, certainly that's what Rutgers believes they can someday win big by shoring up the talent in New Jersey. And evidently the Big Ten believes this as well. So that's why they put him in their conference and such, but hasn't really worked out since then. So I am curious. The other thing, though, is that springs up Matt Canada. Why isn't Matt Canada being talked about for the Vols offensive coordinator position? I think he's great.
Yeah, I wondered that too, actually. My only guess is, and I really do genuinely like Matt Canada. I saw what he did at Maryland this year. Matt Canada doesn't, I think Jerry Pruitt wants a little more of a, I guess you could say, simplified pro style in his offense. I'm not saying that's right, but we know that's how Matt Canada clashed with Ed Orgeron. And Matt Canada does base his offense a lot around more trickery in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine, but I don't have a problem with it. But yeah, I don't think Matt Canada runs a lot of horizontal and reverse plays. I mean, all year that's all Maryland ran pretty much. And I don't think Jerry Pruitt wants an offense based on that.
Is that why maybe a Mike Yursich you think might not come to Tennessee? Because I mentioned Tennessee ran the ball 99 more times than they passed the ball last year, and I'm adjusting to sacks, by the way, with that. I'm not including the sacks as a rushing attempt, which in college football stats officially is, but I took that out. So roughly 100 more times they ran the ball than they threw, even though Tennessee lost 6 games by 25 or more points, where you're generally trying to throw to come back, okay, unless you've called off the dogs. Now, here's the question I've got here for you. Is that then, people talking about Yursich going to Tennessee, but he's going to want to throw. That's what they do in the Big 12. Do you then see Yursich coming to Tennessee? Do you think that could be prohibitive from him becoming the Vols' next offensive coordinator?
I don't know if he would turn it down, but I would say that overall, he's in maybe it's just me, but he's in a much better situation at Oklahoma State right now. And because you're right, he gets to throw the ball a lot more. You're going against Big 12 defenses, and Oklahoma State as a program is in better shape than Tennessee right now.
Yeah.
And so it would, that's one of the reasons. Another big one, I don't know if Tennessee would want him either, because I know he's a candidate, but you think about this, I've read stories in the past where pretty much Mike Gundy has always been really the guy calling the plays on offense for Oklahoma State.
Mm-hmm.
So you question Oklahoma State coordinators a little bit. The same way I think that, I know Dabo Swinney hired Chad Morris, and Chad Morris is now an offensive genius, but the offense is doing fine now without him, and Chad Morris is doing horrible with Arkansas. And so I kind of wondered, sometimes are these head coaches really the authors behind the minds? Really, particularly with spread offenses, the only coach I can think of that churns out consistently good offensive coordinators to become head coaches are Urban Meyer.
Yeah, intriguing, right? One thing I've found is that Yursich is also considered to be a candidate for the Akron job. Terry Bowden stepped down a couple of days ago. Now, Akron, we talk about what's the worst Power 5 school, possibly Kansas, where Tennessee just saw Chip Lindsley, maybe because they were pursuing Hugh Freeze a little bit too hard go to instead of, and they lost their plan B. But I would suggest to you that of all of the programs in the FBS, that possibly Akron might be the very, very worst. They've cut some programs there recently. They just do not even draw the 15,000 that you're supposed to have to stay as a FBS program. Admittedly, there is a lot of talent in that area. It's Ohio, it's near Western Pennsylvania and such. But boy, that is kind of a tough place to go, is Akron. But the thing is, Yursich is from Euclid, Ohio. So, for him it would be coming home and a challenge. And, I've always thought that with that new football stadium they have there, they could win more and all this. He's said to have wanted a job in the MAC. Possibly. It's just that I think Tennessee could pay him more if it came down to that than what Akron could.
And also there's the fact that you're right, Akron does have, it is in kind of a talent-rich area, and I know this, when you're coaching at those smaller schools and talent-rich areas, if you believe in yourself as a head coach, I mean, really all you have to do is be better than the other coaches at evaluating the high school talent. It's not, evaluating is a lot harder at smaller levels. It's pretty easy if you're a big-name school to evaluate talent, because, I mean, I've joked about this, but, like, my mom or my wife could look at some of these players and be like, oh, he's good.
Yeah.
And so if you believe in yourself as a coach, then getting a start at one of those smaller schools, group of 5 schools that's in a talent-rich area is probably your best bet.
It's possible. I mean, one of the ideas is that they say they will let him at Akron, one of the appeals, if it was Yurcich going there, do what he wants to do. It's Akron. What's the filter going to be? I mean, if he wants to throw the ball 50 times a game, who's going to say, no, you shouldn't? It's Akron. I mean, so that was also said to be an appeal that the MAC would have a freedom for their coaches that maybe they wouldn't have at other places. I read that with Yurcich. I think a lot of it's coming home. Caleb Calhoun of All for Tennessee was at a function where the Akron baseball coach, now Akron doesn't have a baseball team anymore, but it's a few years ago, spoke, and it wasn't that long ago, it was probably about 5 years ago. And, I mean, all he could do was speak of, I'm a Cleveland guy, and we're going to shore up the talent around here, and they're going to play Zips baseball and all that. I mean, that was a big theme. So I could actually see where Akron might want to get a hometown guy as their coach. Now, whether that means they can spend more money, because I don't think Akron has any money, than the Vols, if it came down to that, if that's the guy they want, probably not. But it's just something to consider right there. Neil Brown. Now, this is an interesting guy because he's done some nice things down at Troy. They've won 30 games the last 3 years. Scott Satterfield, who just got the job at Louisville, he's only won 29 games over the last 3 years. Something to consider there. But, he left Kentucky to go to Troy. Would you think that Brown would look at Tennessee as a step up? Hey, a little bit of a raise? Or is it just returning to where he was? I mean, SEC offensive coordinator.
No, I don't think at all. I think Neil Brown, as a matter of fact, I was joking saying that, like, Tennessee could when it came down to these 3 guys, these 3 teams, I started joking, like, Tennessee could stumble into making the right hires for Neil Brown, who I've always pushed for. But, yeah, Neil Brown, I don't think would be Troy. It's too good of a situation. He's been very successful there. And Troy, like Akron, funny enough, as we just talked about, and one of those, it's in a talent-rich area, and it's in a smaller conference, and it is the perfect type of job to build your brand. I mean, we know this. Those smaller, some of the best places to do that are the smaller schools in the South, UAB, Troy, Southern Miss, Tulane. You get the right coach. I mean, like Louisiana Tech has produced big-time coaches, Derek Dooley and Sonny Dykes, and they weren't as good at other levels, but yeah, I don't think Neil Brown would. There are too many negatives to come to Tennessee. What if you don't have the personnel you like? What if you clash with Jeremy Pruitt? And then you're right back to square one and trying to build your coaching career.
The Louisiana Tech has always been an intriguing kind of program to me due to the fact that the greatest ever victory in ETSU football is considered to be the 34-14 victory in the 69 Grantland Rice Bowl against Louisiana Tech, and it was Terry Bradshaw's last collegiate game. But if you look at where Louisiana Tech has gone since that time in ETSU, I mean, here's Louisiana Tech, playing in the FBS and such, and here's ETSU that didn't have a program for 12 years, and in fact, in modern ETSU history, the worst loss they ever suffered, even worse than the Tennessee loss this year, was to Louisiana Tech back in 1992. So, they champion around here the victory against Terry Bradshaw, Caleb Calhoun of allfortennessee.com. But when push comes to shove, they went in the left lane after that game. ETSU didn't. They were winless 2 years after that. So I've always kind of been intrigued by Louisiana Tech by that reason. Anybody else you could see entering into the mix here of offensive coordinator for Tennessee, Caleb Calhoun? Could it be, I don't know, speaking of ETSU, a Randy Sanders, a T. Martin, Rush Propst, which would be my biggest nightmare. But, hey, I'm hearing some Twitter scuttlebutt about it. Could you see anybody else coming in?
Well, I wrote an article about this yesterday, and it is way out of left field, and I doubt they'll do it. But the mistake that did former N was not promoting Trooper Taylor to offensive coordinator in 2008. Because then he left, and that's when former went for Dave Clawson. And Trooper Taylor was, if you look at his track record when he was at Tennessee, he restored the running backs, the rushing attack when he became running backs coach. He became running backs coach and produced 2,000-yard rushers in a season. And then he became receivers coach and produced a record-setting receiver in Robert Meacham. And then he went to Oklahoma State, and he was only there for a year because it turned out he didn't get what he thought he was going to get out of it. But his first year there was the first year Mike Gundy produced a top 25 team at Oklahoma State, and he was the co-offensive coordinator there. Then he went to Auburn, and he helped Auburn, while coaching receivers, to build a national championship team. Now, yes, I know it was mainly about Cam Newton. But, I mean, I'm just looking at a guy like him, and I'm like, you know, he's paid his dues for a long time. He's been at Tennessee before. He is familiar with Fulmer. And so, if they were to take a risk, I'd say, why not him?
Well, the only thing I could say is because he's a defensive backs coach at Arkansas State, so his brand has gone down. Now, if there's one place that would hire him, yeah, it would be Tennessee. I'd give you that. By the way, your article on allfortennessee.com, a lot of people are expressing that sentiment, so you've got some influence because I've got on social media, I mean, people saying the exact same thing. Hey, why didn't he take Trooper Taylor instead of Dave Clawson? That sort of. I would point this out, though. Taylor is the defensive backs coach and assistant head coach at Arkansas State. Clawson is taking Wake Forest now to their third straight bowl. So say what you will.
I'm not. I actually think Clawson's a better coach than Trooper Taylor overall. The problem with the Clawson hire was Fulmer was already on thin ice, and Clawson is the type of scheme that takes about 3 years to pick up. Look at everywhere he's been. You know, people. The offense was horrible first 3 years he's there, and so I would agree with you on that. And had Tennessee stuck it out with Fulmer and Clawson, they actually would have been rolling again. Let's not forget that they had Bryce Petty and Todd Boyd committed 2 years later, before Fulmer was fired.
So I know that the recruiting was down Fulmer's last year, but no. Hey, it was down to 35th overall. But then again, recruiting rankings, I mean, what can you say about them? I mean, it's like, you know, hey, Florida State is picked to finish third in the country this year. Oh, really?
Yeah, and a lot of that was due to I remember 2007, Tennessee wins the East, but they start the year 1-2 after 59-20 loss to Florida, and that's when all the rumblings got really loud about Fulmer being fired. ESPN was doing exposés every other day, it seemed like, on whether or not Fulmer had lost it, and I think that had a huge role in the 2008 recruiting class collapsing the way it did.
I'm up against it here, but I got to ask the one last question. Tennessee and top-ranked Gonzaga. That's going to be a big one on Sunday. You know, who do you foresee? What do you foresee the Vols' chances of knocking off the top-ranked Bulldogs being?
If Lamonte Turner is fully healthy, which we still don't know, I do think they have a good chance because, I mean, that gives the Vols a collection of shooters on the outside, and I think, you know, Gonzaga's going to run that zone, and they're going to stick to it. And so it's just going to depend on whether or not the Vols are having a good shooting day. We've seen them be upset number one teams before just because they got red hot shooting the ball, most notably Kansas in 2010 when just everything was falling for them. And I actually have a piece coming out this week about Tennessee basketball has 4 wins in history over number one teams, and we're going to rate them tomorrow.
There you go. I know one of them, I'm trying to think, South Carolina in 1970. Trying to remember. Memphis, was that one?
Yes, Memphis was one in 2008.
Memphis was another one. They beat Kentucky once when they were number one?
Yep, you nailed all 4.
I didn't know the years of Memphis and Kentucky, but yeah, I do know the victory against Frank McGuire's South Carolina team back in the day. Before they were in the SEC, they were in the ACC back then, is legendary. I mean, that's, you know, Ray might be one of Ramier's, it is one of Ramier's signature victories, but regardless. Anyway, he's Caleb Calhoun. I think he's one of Tennessee's signature reporters. Read him at allfortennessee.com. Great historical stuff, including how the 10 coordinator hires of this decade, ranking them this, and he's got a lot to say. Could Derek Dooley have gone 10-2 with the right coordinator? He seems to think so, and he got me convinced. Tri-City Sports Now.